caught in traffic and miss it, or maybe a storm moves in and they just cancel the Thursday boat. Now you're waiting around, you probably have your kids in the car, it's full of fresh groceries, and you're hoping that the Sunday boat is going to be home. This lifestyle is fine today. We're not covering my mentors and 25 people. The entire Western Schoolhouse is right back here. So Maine Coast Heritage Trust, the conservation group, it was started by Peggy Rockefeller and some friends about 30 years ago. They keep these islands undeveloped, but they open them to the public, which is pretty neat. They have paid crews and volunteers that cut hiking trails into the islands and maintain them. There's a great website that shows every one of the islands you can visit, kind of how they work, how to get out there, where to bring your boat in. And as soon as you step ashore, these places are all yours. You can hike out here, picnic, you can camp on the island. People hunt white-tailed deer out here in the fall. During the summer, the eggs hatch. And the young cormorants, they try to get them up to speed as quickly as they can. This is great real estate for a cormorant, but you notice their neighbors are not great. There's herring gulls, the silverback ones, and the larger, more aggressive great blackbacks. I live by the hundreds in the grass here on Green Island. Cormorants are incredible divers. They have no oil in their feathers, or very little. So they soak up seawater like a sponge. It makes them heavy enough to dive over 200 feet deep, where a gull can not really get underwater at all. So these cormorants can swim around underwater like a fish. They can catch a bunch of fish, bring them back to the island. When the gulls see them arrive, they come over and use their larger size to take the fish from them. They try to get them out of the nest so they can eat their eggs, and when the young are born, they try to eat the young too. They're heavily overfished, and also the damming of the rivers really put an end to them. So there are lots and lots of lobsters on the ocean floor in Maine today. The question is, are any of them legal size this time of year? That's what you're looking for. Because most of what you're doing is keeping these lobsters in here so none of their predators can eat them. That's things like big groundfish, seals, anything like that. And we're feeding them bait. All their favorite food is what we bait the traps with, of course. They sit in here, they eat their favorite food, we haul the trap up, we throw them all back in the ocean, and then we go and do it again. So, but it looks like we got some decent prospects in here. So not only do you have to check if lobsters are legal size, we do that by measuring their carapace. That's the rounded back shell right there. So we go from the eye socket of the carapace down to the end where the tail shell comes in. We use this called the gauge or the measure. These are on every boat in Maine. You'll see them all over the place. So a carapace for a lobster to be kept in Maine has to be at least 3 1/4 inches long, no longer than 5 inches. If you are a North American lobster that grows a carapace over 5 inches in Maine this summer, you made it. No one can ever keep that lobster again for any reason. So a couple more years go by, they are going to be too big to even fit into a lobster trap anymore. Chances are no one's ever going to see them again. If they can outgrow this measure in Maine, a North American lobster can live to be well over 100 years old and weigh close to 50 pounds. Makes them the largest crustacean by weight in the world. So these ones we're keeping, 5 to 10 years old. They're pretty small, pretty young lobsters. A male lobster that's legal size, you keep it. A female, you're going to have to make sure she's not wearing fertilized eggs on the bottom of her tail. You can tell that they're female by looking where the tail attaches to the body, the top swimmerets. Right here on this female, they're small and wispy. They look like a little piece of thread or yarn. They have no shell on them. Our males are going to be long, pointy, and covered in shell. So when you see that it's a female, you have to make sure she's not carrying eggs. There'll be about 1,000 here. She'll carry those 1,000 fertilized eggs around for 9 months. Then they will hatch and float away. And out of those 1,000 eggs, one of them, on average, is going to reach maturity and reproduce. All the rest of them are eaten by predators. So lobsters this size, they are not really replacing the millions of lobsters we're removing from the fishery every year. That is why we let the big ones go. As this female grows, the egg count is going up exponentially as she increases in size. So let her outgrow the measure at 5 pounds. She is producing 25 times the number of eggs as 5 of these 1-pound females put together. So we believe very firmly in Maine that the future of our fishery depends on large female lobsters producing millions of eggs and thousands of mature lobsters. So that's why we're letting them go. Everyone throws back egg-bearing females. Everyone in the fishery has been doing that since the 1800s. But Maine fishermen started thinking, if I throw this female back and the eggs hatch and float away, what stops the next person who catches her from keeping her? Nothing. So you haven't really done all that much by returning an egg-bearing female to the water. You've saved maybe 1 lobster when it's all said and done. So they said, well, how about every time I catch a female lobster I have to put back, I'll mark her so that no one can ever keep her again. And what they started doing in the 1940s was cutting a notch right here in her tail. There's a little slice of meat in that flipper, so the notch grows back. And in Maine, when you catch a female lobster, you have to look there and see if anyone has ever cut a notch on her tail, and if they have, they've designated her as a permanent member of the breeding population, and no one can keep her again. The notch fills in, but usually she's outgrown the measure by the time it does, so that's a ticket for life. This is something that Maine fishermen started doing voluntarily in the 1940s as an investment in the future. And if you know another human being, we don't do a whole lot of this. Just kind of spontaneously, naturally do that. And if you know a commercial fisherman, no. Rules are the enemy. They're what keep you from making money. But so it's unique behavior for these fishermen. This female has no eggs. She has no notch. And she's also legal size. So this is the second keeper that we've gotten, that we get to keep on the boat since we started running these tours in the beginning of June. So that's great. We're getting close to a lobster dinner here. That's good news. I saw another one that's got some promise. Yeah, that is a male. It's a hard shell. You can see the barnacles on the shell there, all the scratches on the bottom. The whole thing is as hard as a rock, the shell is. The swimmerets on his tail, they look totally different than the female. They're long and pointy, they have shell on them. When you see that it is a male lobster, all you have to do is check and see if he's legal size, and he is. So me, all my belly aching about how you can't keep any lobsters this time of year, of course, totally wrong on this trap. So this is a great trap. We're gonna get maybe 3 pounds out of this trap. The average this time of year is 1/4 of a pound per trap. So usually you're gonna get a 1 pound lobster in every 4 traps. So that's a great trap. That's a really good one. So that's a legal sized male, another one that we can keep on the boat. Now the kids might even get some. This is another female. She has no eggs and she has no notch, but she is undersized. She has that shorter carapace. She will grow into the measure this year, so she's about 4 years old. And but she's undersized now, so she goes back in the water. This is real typical lobster for this time of year. You see lots of these around. Some of them might have been measured 20 times already this year, and they just hang out in traps, eat bait, up to the ocean surface, get measured, back in the water, and then back down to the bottom. Just wait a minute. Back comes the trap, and it's all full of fish again, and life is pretty good for an undersized lobster. So she'll go in. Another female that is a little bigger than the other one, but just a little under the measure. That'll be a nice, like 1.5 pound soft shell lobster when she sheds, but she has no eggs, no notch, but she's undersized, so she has to go back too. And that's going to be true of all of the rest of them. These two are really into the smaller they are, the faster they are. So these ones don't think you won't get hurt by a little lobster. They are lightning quick. Fishermen call them snappers because they're fast. And they're also, you can see they're into it with each other, very aggressive. So making up for it with attitude, what they lack in size. It's dead and stinky, so it catches some lobsters. They're scavengers. So when something dies in the ocean and settles on the ocean floor, they pick up the smell and they crawl over and eat it. That's what they're doing down there. So when they pick up the smell of the bait in the trap, they crawl towards it, and they are stuck to the ocean floor by gravity. So we make them crawl up an incline in order to get at the bait that's right on either side of the bait on the kitchen side of the trap. These are called the kitchen heads. So you're going to climb up that incline to eat the bait. You have to fall into the bottom of the trap. And once you've decided you've had enough and you want to look for a way out, you can crawl around the outside of the trap, but you're going to be crawling underneath the incline, underneath the kitchen head, across the end, back under the other kitchen head. The fourth side of the kitchen is the only place to keep looking. It's the same trick again. It's the parlor head, but it's even harder, or impossible to get out when you get to the end of the parlor head, fall into the parlor side of the trap. Now you can crawl around all 4 sides. There's no way out. The only way out of this side would be to swim up in the water and go back the way you came, but they can't do that. They can only crawl around at the bottom. So this design is about 130 years old. If you see an old wooden trap, we don't use them to fish anymore. They look different, but take a closer look. They're set up just like this. All we did was switch from local wood, oak and spruce, to nylon coated wire. They've been set up just like this for a long time. Another one. So with the track picked all out, now it's empty. In order to set it again, we've got to put fresh bait in there. Even if there's some of the herring bait left in that pocket, it's lost its oil and its smell, and it's not going to fish. So we're going to dump out the old bait. If you see the big flock of gulls following behind a fishing boat, that's why. It's the bait that you're dumping out of the traps that's been uneaten, so that you can put the fresh bait in. Getting there.
All right. right, there we are, everybody. Thank you all very much for coming out with us today.
Thank you.
That's it.